Welcome to Global Truth. This is your host, Dr. Nasir Baig. Write down the date. Tuesday, June 23rd, 2026. Because what happened in the voting booths across New York City this past Tuesday wasn't just a localized political primary. It was an absolute political earthquake. The kind of seismic shift that doesn't just reshape a city, but sends a shockwave traveling at terminal velocity straight toward Washington, D.C., redefining what the upcoming midterm elections will look like across the entire United States. Just 7 months ago, Zohran Mamdani took office as the 112th mayor of New York City, the city's first Muslim and democratic socialist mayor. The establishment called his 2025 win a fluke. They said his working class coalition couldn't scale. Well, this week, Mayor Mamdani didn't just prove them wrong, he went into the backyard of the traditional democratic establishment, backed 3 progressive challengers, and pulled off a clean, historic, monumental 3-for-3 sweep. The Mamdani Wave is officially here. It unseated heavy-hitting sitting incumbents, secured open seats in deep blue districts, and proved that the political center of gravity in the Democratic Party has fundamentally, drastically shifted. Tonight, we break down exactly how this happened, the massive policy changes driving it, and the jaw-dropping new data on Israel, Palestine, and AIPAC that explains why the traditional Democratic playbook just went up in flames. Let's look at the battlefield. How massive was the sweep? Let's break down the 3 districts where the traditional party elite got completely cleaned up. First, New York's 10th Congressional District. Former City Controller Brad Lander pulled off what many thought was impossible, defeating 2-time incumbent Representative Dan Goldman. Now think about who Dan Goldman is. He's heir to the Levi Strauss, the Levi's fortune. He was the lead counsel in Donald Trump's first impeachment trial and a darling of mainstream center-left media. Lander ran directly at him on a hyper-progressive economic platform. But crucially, Lander campaigned heavily on placing strict conditions and restrictions on US military aid to Israel. Before the votes were even counted, the prediction markets had Goldman's chances of holding seat crashing to just 1, 2, or 3%. Lander walked away with a dominant victory. Second, look at the New York's 13th district. This might be the biggest upset of the decade. Darializa Avila Chevalier, a democratic socialist and a doctoral student, stepped into the ring against 5-term incumbent Adriano Espaillat. And Espaillat isn't just an ordinary lawmaker. He is the immensely powerful chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He had the money, the infrastructure, the machine, but Avila Chevalier, backed heavily by Mamdani's grassroots volunteer army, capitalized on real frustration over the local cost of living and shifting views on foreign policy, taking down a giant of New York politics and succeeding. And finally, New York's 7th district. In the open seat left by retiring Nydia Velázquez, State Assemblywoman and Democratic Socialist Claire Valdez clinched the nomination. She didn't just win, she soundly defeated Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, the candidate handpicked and fiercely defended by the city's traditional political machine. 3 races, 3 safe, deep blue districts, 2 powerful incumbents crushed, 1 establishment favorite defeated. This wasn't a close call. It was a rout. Now, let's do some political forensics. The mainstream media is going to tell you that this was just about local organizing. But if you look at the raw data, there is a massive elephant in the room that the establishment tried to spend millions of dollars to ignore. America's shifting stance on Israel and Palestine. Nowhere did this play a more devastating role than in New York 10 against Dan Goldman. Goldman was widely viewed by voters in his district as unconditionally pro-Israel. Brad Lander, heavily endorsed by Mayor Mamdani, ran on an explicitly pro-Palestine human rights platform. And if you think this is unique to New York, look at how the entire national landscape among registered Democrats has fundamentally transformed over the last 2.5 years. Let's look at the numbers. Late 2023, Democrat voters were almost evenly split on who they sympathized with more. In fact, it leaned slightly towards Israeli 34% to Palestinian 31%. June 2026, look at the screen right now. Support for Israel among Democratic voters has cratered all the way down to just 16%. Meanwhile, sympathy for the Palestinians has about doubled, surging to a clear absolute majority of 60%. Think about that math. A 3-point advantage for Israel inside the Democratic base has transformed into a massive 44-point advantage for the Palestinians. And if you think this is a divide split purely along religious lines, look at this stunning cross-tabulation from a pre-election poll regarding Gaza. When Jewish Democrats were asked if they believed Israel's actions in Gaza constituted a genocide, a 52% majority said yes, compared to just 39% who said no. The base has completely transformed, which brings us to AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. For years, AIPAC backing was seen as an untouchable shield of campaign cash. During this primary cycle, Mayor Mamdani stood at a rally and openly called AIPAC monster. The establishment gasped. They thought it would alienate voters, but Mamdani knew exactly where the electorate was. Back in 2024, only 34% of Democrats said that AIPAC backing made them less likely to vote for a candidate. Flash forward to right now, June 2026, that number has skyrocketed by 19 points. Today, a 53% majority of Democrats say that if AIPAC backs a politician, they are less likely to vote for them. How many say it makes them more likely? Just 5%. AIPAC's millions didn't save Dan Goldman in deep blue districts. That money has officially become a political liability. But let's be entirely clear. Foreign policy does not win elections alone. It has to pair with a domestic vision that people can feel in their everyday lives. And that is where the power of Mayor Zohran Mamdani comes in. Less than 7 months into his mayoral tenure, and Mamdani has achieved a near mythic kingmaker status. And he did it by executing a dual-track strategy. He paired an unapologetic, highly moral stance on international human rights with laser-focused, tangible domestic victories for working-class New Yorkers. Over the last few months, Mamdani has taken major swings as mayor. He tackled the city's budget deficit, secured massive state funding for universal childcare, expanded rapid bus network, and just this month, his administration pushed through a historic rent freeze on 1- and 2-year leases for rent-stabilized apartments. When Mamdani shows up to campaign for candidates like Lander, Avila Chevalier, or Valdez, he isn't just bringing a progressive brand, he's bringing an ultra-potent, highly organized electoral coalition. He's proving to voters that democratic socialist policies aren't just pie-in-the-sky academic ideas. They are actively lowering the cost of living for everyday people in New York right now. When Mamdani campaigned last Tuesday, he told voters, this isn't about electing more Democrats, it is about electing better Democrats. He tapped directly into a profound voter fatigue with establishment politicians who offer nothing but status quo platitudes while the cost of rent and groceries crushes everyday families. So, what is the ultimate takeaway as we look towards the rest of the country and the looming midterm elections? The New York primary sweep is a flashing red warning light for the Democratic establishment nationwide. The old guard can no longer rely on massive infusions of corporate super PAC cash or legacy establishment name recognition to protect themselves. The electorate is changing, moving fast, and growing younger. If you are an establishment Democrat running in a deep blue or even a purple district anywhere in America right now, you have to realize two things. First, voters are demanding structural, material economic relief, whether that's housing protection, childcare, or real living wages. If you don't deliver, a progressive challenger will. Second, the era of unconditional, uncritical support for foreign military campaigns is fading, an unprecedented backlash from the grassroots basis. The shift in sympathy towards Palestine isn't a temporary blip. It is a generational realignment that is rewiring the baseline rules of American electoral policies. Zohran Mamdani's coalition has built a blueprint. They proved that an organized progressive movement can govern a massive metropolis successfully and simultaneously scale outward to sweep federal congressional seats. The establishment got caught sleeping on Tuesday. But after the Mamdani Wave washed through New York, nobody's sleeping anymore. Thank you for joining us. Keep your eyes on the numbers because the road to the midterms just got a whole lot more interesting. Take good care of yourself.